Welcome back. My name is Ted Thomas. We're going to talk about how does a tax sale work. Now, a tax deed sale is really an auction. And so the auction process has a lot of rules and a lot of strategies that you should use. So let's kind of work our way through it. So the big question is, how does a tax deed sale really work? Now, many of these tax sales are a big mystery to people. Now, they don't have to be a mystery because they're public auctions. Anybody can go and watch them. If you want, you can watch them by standing in the audience. You just register, or you can actually bid at the auction. But I'm going to tell you, go and watch a few auctions before you even think about bidding. Now, very few people have done any investigation on what's going on, yet they show up at an auction and think that they're going to do well. Well, let's follow along with this class that I'm giving you now, because in this episode, I'm going to make sure you understand some of the auction rules and some of the things to be cautious of. So how does a tax deed auction work? Well, I call it a tax deed auction. Some people want to call it a sale. The question really is tax deed sale, but it's really an auction. Now, these auctions have been going on for well over 200 years. Now, this is a little known business, and for some people, it's quite lucrative. For other people, they lose their assets. Yes, they lose their assets. So what I'm going to suggest you do is you ought to attend a couple of auctions and watch what's going on. Now, I'll be right back and give you lots of new information. All right, so let's talk about the significant things that are going to happen at a tax deed sale. How does it work? How is this auction process going to take place? Now, you're going to find out this is a great opportunity. Sometimes you can get properties for 10 and 20 cents on the dollar, and there's no mortgage. Other people will pay 30, 40, and 50 cents on the dollar. Some people will even pay more. So you don't want to be in the pay more category unless you already have an exit strategy that you're going to be able to sell it quick. All right, so what you're doing is you're buying used and abused properties that you're going to try to either fix up or you're going to try to resell. In other words, you're going to recycle the property back into the marketplace, but you're going to try and get it at a bargain price. You'll be able to do that if you do your research and you know what you're going to do on your exit strategy. Now, nationwide, there's going to be 5,000 tax defaulted auctions this year. So these auctions start with a legislative body that says this is what we're going to do with properties that people don't pay their taxes. Then the legislative body turns to the county supervisors or the county commissioners and says these are the rules, and we expect the tax collector and the treasurer to follow the rules. So everything will be executed and the auction will be conducted by the treasurer. Now, the treasurer has a lot of people within the county working, like the tax collector, the tax assessor, and of course county employees. But those are all official employees and they can all auction the property. So how much is the property going to auction for? Well, taxes are basically 1 or 2% of the value of the property. Now, places like New York and California, some other states, they might have a higher than 2% tax. But basically, it's the back taxes. And what the county wants is they want to collect those taxes. Now, how are they going to collect them? Well, they're going to issue notices. They call those notices of default if people don't pay. But most people are very honorable and they'll pay their tax. So they stay on what's called the tax roll, pay their taxes every year. There's a certain amount of people who don't pay their tax and they end up on a different list, and that's called a default list. Now, the default list will get notices of default saying, look, this is a process, and if you don't pay us, we're going to confiscate the property. So what the county simply does is they tell them, look, if you don't pay their tax, the consequence is we will confiscate the property. All right, so how does the tax deed sale work? It simply works that they're going to have a public auction and they're going to sell that property to the absolute highest bidder. All right, now all 50 states by the legislature will have these same kind of laws. And the laws will say, if you don't pay the tax, you forfeit the property. All right, well, the legislature doesn't have time to come down and do that, so they pass the rules down to the treasurer, the tax collector, and the assessors, and they will issue notices of default telling you that you now have a notice. If you don't pay your tax by a certain date, they will actually have an auction. Now, when that auction takes place, whether there's a tenant in the property or you're in the property or anybody that owns the property, they are going to sell that property to the absolute highest bidder. The highest bidder will get a property without a mortgage. As a matter of fact, many of the mortgages might be deleted from the property because the treasurer has power to delete those properties. All right, well, how will you know about these auctions? Well, just like what you're seeing right now. They're going to be in the newspaper. They'll also be on the county website, and they'll announce the auction, and they'll show a list of the properties by the actual tax number. So you might have to get the number and then go look it up at the county and see what property it is. But there will be public notices, and it will be a public auction. All right, there's no surprises. The owner has had many notices of default. Now, those notices of default are pretty darn serious. Now, I don't make any of the rules. The legislature for the state makes the rules. They pass it down to the county. The county then executes it by having the treasurer, the tax collector, and the tax assessor. In other words, government officials at the local level will conduct the auction. And when they do conduct that auction, they have been given authority to do a lot of things. For example, they have the power of sales. They can sell that property. They also have the power to wipe out the mortgage at the official county records. They can wipe the records absolutely clean. So that means that this could be a house that's kind of pristine in a certain way. Why? Because now you're going to buy a property, and if it was a house, great. It's not going to have a mortgage on it. Why? Because it's going to be wiped out. In other words, they're going to X out the mortgage at the public records. I don't make these rules. I'm just passing on the rule to you. State legislature made the rule, passed it down to the county, and the county is executing all that. Now, the tax collector means business at these auctions. In other words, they are responsible people, and they're going to conduct a very responsible auction. So this episode today is all about how does a tax deed sale work? Well, it's a tax deed auction, and it's going to work as an auction, meaning the price will start low, probably at very close to the back taxes, and it'll keep getting bid up until someone wins. The highest person will win. All right, now what happened to the property? It was confiscated. So it didn't cost the county anything. They basically confiscated. They seized the property. They moved the tenants or the residents off the property, and they're selling it to you. So that's called a public tax defaulted auction, which you're seeing. Now, there's no surprises at this auction. Those owners have had numerous notices of default. And so that process is called due process. So notice of default is part of the due process that's issued by the law of the land saying, look, you haven't paid your taxes. You have now forfeited your property to the county if you don't pay the tax. So these notices are issued many times. Sometimes they're even issued by a local sheriff will have those delivered. So these auctions could take place. Sometimes they're online, sometimes they're offline. It's just going to be up to the county. But I can assure you it's the law, and the county will auction the property. So if someone receives these notices in due process, if they don't do something about it, they are absolutely going to lose the property. Now, how does that benefit you? Well, you're buying property at very close to the back taxes if there isn't a lot of bidding. Now, that doesn't mean the bidding couldn't go up to 20%, 30%, even 50% or higher of value, but it's going to start small. So it's a competitive auction. If it's a large county with a lot of people, there'll be a lot of people bidding. If it's a small county and there's not a lot of people, well, the bidding probably won't go quite as high. But there's going to be plenty of bidding going on, and the highest bidder will get the property without a mortgage. Now, let me repeat myself. You need to know the rules. If you don't know the rules, don't go to that auction. Or before you go, just find out from the website or find out what the auction rules are going to be so that you know specifically what process is going to take place. There's no tricks. The county treasurer is a serious person, and they're going to follow the exact rules of the auction that were outlined by the legislature and the county board of supervisors. All right, so what are we talking about today? We're talking about how does a tax sale or tax auction work? It works as a very specific process. Anybody can show up at the auction. Anybody can buy. It's public auction. It'll always be held in a public place. For example, the courthouse steps. Or if it's a large auction, could be held inside a county building, or could be even held out in the fairgrounds. This is a legal process. There's no way you're going to change it. Keep in mind who's conducting the auction, the sheriff or other county's employees. Now, forget it if you think you're going to go argue with those people. You are not going to argue with them, not going to do you any good to get mad. They'll actually have the sheriff remove you. All right, so the auctioneer is going to follow rules. Are you going to get the rules? Yes. You can get the rules from the county. You can get them from the website. And more than likely, when you go to the auction, they'll have rules there. They'll have them written down so that you can read them. If you don't follow the rules, many auctions will have a sheriff there. They will remove you from the auction. All right, so I'm about to button it up. Just keep in mind, this is no surprise at the auction. There's either going to be notices of default issued for all the people, and if the property goes to auction, when that gavel comes down, that's the final say. When the gavel comes down, no arguing, no bickering. It doesn't matter if it's a secretary that came down from the county office and auctioned it. That person is the official auctioneer, and they will sell the property, and there's not going to be any controversy takes place. All right, so there's a public auction. Anybody that wants can go to the auction. All right, here's some words of caution. Beware of what you're buying. These are properties someone didn't want. Why didn't they want that property? The treasurer sells as is. Buyer beware. Let me say that again. Buyer beware. I don't know what's wrong with the property. You need to observe it. It's rare that they ever let anybody go inside these properties, but you need to bid accordingly. Don't overbid, because if there's repairs to be made, it might be more than slightly used and abused. It might be a high quality property where you could turn the key and go in. I've had that happen. I've had people turn the key and the house was a hoarder house. I've had people turn the key and it was damaged. I don't know which is going to happen, but buyer beware and bid accordingly. Don't overbid. Now I'm going to finish up right now by giving you two big mistakes that happen at the auction. Big mistake number one is people do not look at the property. If you haven't looked at the property, I'm going to tell you not to bid. There's a lot of reasons not to bid. There could have been a windstorm, there could have been a flood, could have been a fire. What if it was next to a chicken farm? There can be all kinds of things wrong with that property that you wouldn't want it after you bought it. Once you buy the property, I'm telling you, it's buyer beware. The county will have sold it and the auction is over. There's not going to be another auction and you're not going to give it back to them. Second big mistake is people get all involved in the bidding and they bid too much. So that means they didn't have a strategy for selling. So you want to have an exit strategy so you know exactly what you're going to sell it for before you start bidding. All right, my name is Ted Thomas. I have a free gift for you. Just go below me and register. I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video.